Shabbat Shalom. My husband, Rich, once gave me a card for my birthday that both expressed his deep love for me and his ability to really see me in my entirety, flaws and all. The cover was a cartoon of a person staring into an open refrigerator. The inside of the door and all of the shelves were filled with bottles of milk and nothing else. The caption read, "Honey, where's the milk?" Spoken in an irritated tone, more like, "Rich, where's the milk?" That could have been me. He likes to joke that most of my sentences begin with, "Where is?" and almost always what I'm looking for is right there in front of me. Now, my case may be extreme, a result of ADHD, or simply a mind that moves towards thoughts and away from what lies before my eyes. But don't we all sometimes have difficulty seeing what is right there in front of us? In this week's Torah portion, an enemy prophet named Balaam sets out on his donkey to curse the people of Israel. 3 times, an angel of God brandishing a sword blocks their way. 3 times, the donkey swerves off the path. 3 times, Balaam, the seer, the prophet, sees nothing, threatening the donkey, beating her, pressing her forward. Suddenly and miraculously, the donkey speaks to her master, crying out, "What have I done to you that has called for this kind of treatment? Have I ever done anything before that has led you astray?" Realizing that the behavior of his trusted donkey was an act of care, Balaam's eyes finally open to the angel standing before them in warning. When he finally arrives at a site overlooking the Israeli encampment, his words of curse are transformed to blessing. Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov mishkenotecha Yisrael. How good are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, Yisrael. He opens his eyes and he sees the beauty of what Israel is and can be. This story of Balaam reminds us that we often miss what is right there before us, but that it is never too late to open our eyes. In May, I traveled to Israel with 13 colleagues. I heard 2 messages repeated in different words from speakers and colleagues, from friends and people on the street, over and over and over. These messages have continued, growing in volume and intensity. The first is how deeply people in Israel appreciate the American Jewish community keeping its eyes on the plights and needs of hostages and their families, evacuated communities in the north, IDF soldiers and their loved ones, all Israelis who are grieving from loss and suffering from injury. The second message is a fervent plea, asking us to open our eyes to what may be even more painful to see and acknowledge. Israel's extremist government is not acting in the interest of its people. We are hearing this message in unprecedented numbers from people who were part of the government, part of the military, people who have pledged their lives to Israel's well-being and security. In early June, 6 months after his son and nephew died even just days apart, battling in Gaza, Gadi Eisenkot resigned as chief of staff from the unity government. His resignation followed that of Benny Gantz. These indisputable patriots charged Netanyahu of putting his personal interests before the lives of the hostages and the well-being of the nation. During my trip, my group met with Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, IDF spokesperson for international media. Since the beginning of the war, he has had more than 750 interviews about the war. Despite his overall professional demeanor, Lerner seemed uncomfortable and evaded several of our questions. I was both stunned and not at all surprised when just a couple of weeks ago, he resigned from his post. Lieutenant Colonel Lerner explained that he was in an impossible position for two reasons. First, after 9 months, there is still no political strategy for the war that is being fought now. Second, while Lerner was up for the task of fighting against Hamas messaging, which circulates in partial truths and unreliable data worldwide, he could no longer battle the hateful and damaging statements from within by many of Israel's own governmental leaders, or, as Lerner describes them, a bunch of pyromaniacs who talk nonsense. As an IDF spokesman, Lerner said, "I see myself as representing the soldiers, the bereaved families, all the heroes who fell. I try to speak on their behalf and say in all the interviews that we are fighting a just war, a war for our security, not a war of revenge." And then I get asked, "But a minister in your government is talking about an atomic bomb." He said, "There is no good way to answer that." Many hostage families have lost faith in the government. I was at a protest in Israel when Einav Zangaukar, former Likud voter, former Netanyahu supporter, and mother of Hamas hostage Matan, excoriated the government for its plans to invade Rafah rather than pursue a ceasefire agreement that could bring her son and others home. She speaks for many. While there are protests every hour of every day in front of each of the Prime Minister's residences, in addition to thousands taking the streets every Saturday night, there are also those who are hesitant to speak out against the government. There are some families and citizens who are still putting their trust in the government. But we must open our eyes and ears to the majority of Israelis telling us that they have lost complete faith in those entrusted with their safety. We must heed the words of those who sat again and again and again at the negotiating table and clearly saw that Prime Minister Netanyahu doesn't have the hostages as his priority, doesn't have ending the war as his priority, that he is guided by his own political and personal self-interest. A few days ago, Knesset member and Reform Rabbi Gilad Kariv addressed American clergy at an emergency virtual gathering. His face looked sickened, describing how Netanyahu's extremist coalition partners, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and others, are using the national trauma of war, young Israelis putting their lives on the line, to distract from raids, attacks, road closings, growing restrictions, and increased violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. He is furious with their disloyalty to their own people, furious that they are using this war to carry forward their mission to upset the delicate balance between the delicate system between checks and balances, to legitimize illegal outposts, setting up annexation, all to permanently change the core nature and values of Israel as a Jewish and democratic state, to destroy the liberal society that Theodore Herzl and Israel's founders envisioned and then articulated in its Declaration of Independence. If you don't believe Rabbi Kariv, believe the words of the settlers themselves. They aren't keeping silent. They're saying it and doing it out loud. Weeks ago, Settlements and National Projects Minister Orit Strzok celebrated her party's strides in growing settlements, talking about these months, describing them as a time of miracles. Here's what she said. For me, this is like a period of miracles. I feel like someone standing at a traffic light. I want to accomplish as much as possible in the land of Israel at large, and as much as we can in the Hebron Hills before the light turns green. An Israeli government official proudly and publicly celebrating these disastrous, deadly, awful months as a period of miracles. Unthinkable, but true. Right there for us to see, right there for us to hear. It is nothing short of devastating to criticize Israel's government while the country is at war. It is heartbreaking. As a rabbi, it is actually frightening. But if it's hard for me, if it's hard for us, imagine how painful, how utterly hard and painful it is for those who have committed themselves for years to serving their country in the battlefield and in houses of government. The least we can do is listen and amplify their voices. The least we can do is see the truths that they are holding up to us. In a few days, Netanyahu will be coming to the States to meet with President Biden and to speak before Congress. For weeks, my email, my inbox has been flooded with messages and urging me to come and join in the protest, urging as many people as possible to come and to protest Netanyahu and our government receiving him. And honestly, I've been torn. I find protests and rallies to lack the nuance that I have been striving so hard to live and to foster. And I know that there will be groups of people there who hate Israel and who seek its demise. But so many people that we trust and who trust us are asking us to represent those who love Israel and are willing to fight for its future by saying this government is not acting in Israel's interest. Israelis from across the political spectrum are urging, pressure your government to pressure our government to forge an agreement that will bring our hostages home. Speak out about the extremists who are abusing their power for their own messianic ends. So, I will go to DC. I will stand with hostage families and former IDF soldiers, with democracy fighters and peace activists. And I will continue to call attention to the truths right before us that are painful to accept, even when it is frightening for me to do so. Some may call me an ass. So be it. Like the donkey of this week's Torah portion, I am heeding the messengers standing before us, calling upon us to help them halt and change course. As these brave Israelis continue to show us, recognition and action is a way forward from despair, toward hope, toward a solution, toward the vision described by Balaam's blessing so many thousands of years ago, Ma tovu ohalecha Yaakov, mishkenotecha Yisrael, Israel, a nation rooted in goodness, transforming curses into blessing. Amen.